Now, in between this Old and this New section, the Old and New Testaments, there's an intertestamental period.
Yes.
Without getting into all the nuts and bolts of that, about how long was that?
Well, in your Bible, it's one page.
Yeah, that's right.
You're right. It's just
well, we got through that in a hurry.
And then we turn the page. Old Testament ends in Malachi.
Yeah.
You turn the page to Matthew, and about 400 years has elapsed.
One page represents 400, which is a great place to stop and say, when you're reading your Bible, you have to understand that you may go from one chapter to another. You may have gone past 15 years of time.
Yeah.
Or as you put it, you turn a page, you've covered 400.
Yeah.
Now you get in the New Testament, you suddenly meet Jesus. And what would that be? What would they be that category?
Well, the first 4 books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are all called Gospels.
Right.
Gospel just means good news.
Yes.
And so they are the stories of Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, the events of Jesus' life, primarily his ministry.
Right.
And they tell us what the good news is. Ultimately, they're pointing to show that Jesus is the good news. He is the gospel. And so that makes up the first 4 books of the New Testament.
Now, they're all writing about the same subject, but they're different.
Yes.
That's also is a little bit confusing to people.
Yes.
I'm teaching through Matthew right now. I taught through Mark not too long ago, and there are some parallels. Mark is the earliest of the 4.
Yep.
But when you get to Matthew, there are some details about the king in the eyes of the Jews. Their Messiah has come. And you read more of that in Matthew than you do in Mark.
Yes.
So they differ.
Yes.
Now, what about Acts? When you get to the Acts.
Acts is kind of a unique book. It's sort of full title, The Acts of the Apostles. I don't know if you know this, but I've been trying to retitle the book Some of the Acts of Some of the Apostles, since they're not all mentioned.
It's not going to find its way into the Bible.
It'll never work.
Yeah,
it'll never
but it's
work.
a good idea.
But it helps us understand sort of how the church starts. It's the history book for the New Testament.
Okay. So just like Genesis through Joshua and Judges and all the history of the Old Testament, you would have a history section in the New Testament. But now there may be a little history in the Gospels.
Sure.
So it's not like hard and fast categories.
Right. And that's another thing that often people need to hear is that, for example, you go to the Old Testament prophets, some of them are poetic.
Yeah, they are.
And so you have prophecy, but it's being presented in a particular type of poetry, which can add some challenges for readers.
And you know what else? Some are biographical.
Yes.
Jonah, Daniel.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all about those men. And you get to Zephaniah, not so much about him, but his times as a prophet. Anyway, we get through Acts, and we get into a long list of letters.
Yes. Generally, we divide the letters into 2 sections.
Okay.
We have one prolific letter writer in the New Testament.
We do.
Being the Apostle Paul.
Yeah.
And then we have everyone else.
Got it.
And so we usually call them Paul's letters or the Pauline epistles. Sometimes we'll use those theological words. And then what we usually say is the general letters or the general epistles.
So that would be beyond Paul's writings. Beginning maybe with Hebrews. And going all the way through the 3rd letter of John. This would be in the right. Even though John wrote a gospel, he came back and wrote 3 letters, didn't he?
And then he wrote one more book at the end, which is kind of a genre all its own, the book of Revelation. And it's prophetic, but it's also covering the end, and sometimes we'll call it apocalyptic. Apocalyptic literature or prophetic literature, and that too is one book. And that's kind of how the whole thing is arranged.